attendees out by also posting the Facebook Live link so they can be taken forward and posted on their own walls as well. Just post a link of that here in the chat box.
Okay, I will. Just wait a minute for a while.
Nathan, can you play the video?
Toastmaster Ed, we cannot hear the video. It's just, I mean, the audio. We can only see the video. Ed,
Yes, I'm fixing it.
okay. because you're doing a screen share, and when you do a screen share, it doesn't capture the audio; it just captures the video.
Nathan, are you there?
Yes, now I'm
Okay.
back. Yeah. So
Please
now
play the video.
I will playing right now the video.
Speaker number 9, Harold Patterson. The pain passes. The pain passes. Harold Patterson.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, friends, and distinguished guests. At the beginning of this century, in a home in southern France, the great French impressionist Henri Matisse watched as an easel was propped in front of a crippled old man. And he watched as a nurse placed a paintbrush between the fingers of the old man's twisted rheumatic hand. And then Matisse turned to his friend, the aging artist, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and asked him why he continued to paint when the pain was so intense. And Renoir's answer was this: "My dear friend, the pain passes, but the beauty remains." What a magnificent thought. The pain passes, but the beauty remains. Renoir's pain eventually took his life, yet the beauty of his works, the creation of his art, remains with us even today. The very nature of our human existence ensures us that we too, at some time, in some way, will experience pain. And whether it be physical, emotional, or both, long-term, short-term, or lasting a lifetime, we must remember to be true to ourselves and to do those things which bring us the greatest joy. And then, too, like Renoir, our pain will pass. Sometimes our pain may be emotional. Someone once said that the human mind is the most remarkable of all creations. Think about that. It starts working even before we are born. It works continuously 24 hours a day, collecting and storing information, and never stops until we stand up to give a speech. As Toastmasters, probably the greatest pain that we will experience will be in those anxious moments just before we give our first speech. Our icebreaker, remember? That knot right in the pit of your stomach? The trembling legs, the blood racing through your veins, those sweaty palms? Yet no matter how great that pain is, there is no greater beauty than the feeling of accomplishment as we take our seat when it's over. And that's a feeling, a beauty that remains with us always. On June 23rd, 1940, a baby girl was born to a couple in Clarksville, Tennessee. The joy of this birth was overshadowed by the complications of its prematureness. The child developed double pneumonia and then scarlet fever, and by the time she was 6 years old, it was determined that she had polio. And that meant braces, confinement, and excruciating pain, yet with each visit to the doctor, her questions were always the same. When can I take the braces off? When will I walk? When will I be able to run with my friends? And each time the doctor's answer was this: I don't know. Maybe never. The little girl's pain was great, yet it was not strong enough to overcome her spirit, because one day she did take the braces off, and she did walk, and she did run. And did she ever run? In Rome in 1960, she ran for the whole world. To the French, she was known as La Gazelle. To the Italians, the Black Pearl. and to the rest of the world, her friends, and especially her 18 brothers and sisters. She was known as Wilma Rudolph, fastest woman in the world. Winner of 3 Olympic gold medals in Rome in 1960, Wilma Rudolph was living proof that the pain passes and the beauty remains. The pain of losing a loved one is something that never quite goes away, yet in time, even the pain of a loss is eased by the remembrance of that person's life. In 1935, a man died tragically in a plane crash in Alaska. The entire world felt the pain of this loss. His gift was laughter, and at this time he was helping a troubled world laugh its way through a Great Depression. The loss of Will Rogers was a painful one indeed, yet the beauty of his life, his wit and wisdom, remains with us to this very day. Will Rogers said this: "In Oklahoma, we have an average annual rainfall of 31.2 inches. And boy, you ought to be there the day we get it." And again, the beauty remains. Sometimes our pain may be both physical and emotional. In 1983, a man and woman were married at the age of 34, and 2 years later, they decided to have a child. Not an unusual decision, but because of their age, they knew that certain precautions must be taken. And they were. After several thorough examinations, the doctor said, "Go for it." Their dream of having a child of their own would soon come true. And for the first 7 months, the pregnancy progressed flawlessly, but then the doctor noticed that something was wrong. A condition called preeclampsia would send the mother to bed under 24-hour hospital observation and threaten the lives of both mother and child. The only cure was to deliver the child now, but it was too soon, too early to do that. Valuable time was needed, so they waited and they prayed. 3 agonizing weeks went by, and finally the doctor said, "We must deliver this child now." And at 5:21 p.m. on July 24th, 1985, the doctor handed me my newborn daughter. And he looked at me and said, "She's 6 weeks premature and only 4 pounds 4 ounces. But she's a fighter, and she'll be just fine." And as the tears flowed freely, my wife and I now knew that the pain had passed and the beauty was here. The pain of life is inevitable for each of us. And whether it be physical, emotional, or both, long-term, short-term, or lasting a lifetime, we must remember to be true to ourselves and to do those things which bring us the greatest joy. And then finally, to remember, listen to, and embrace the words of Renoir as they are brushed across the canvas of our soul when he said, "My dear friend, the pain passes, but the beauty, oh, the beauty remains forever." Mr. Toastmaster.
Dear guests and fellow Toastmasters, to start our webinar, let us all welcome Division K Director, Edralyn Paul Gascon, Distinguished Toastmaster.
Thank you, Toastmaster Niran. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, fellow Toastmasters and friends. Welcome to our 3rd episode of more years of Toastmasters wisdom. So as Division K Director, I officially open this webinar. Now let us listen to our Toastmasters promise. As a member of Toastmasters International and my club, I promise to attend club meetings regularly, to prepare all my projects to the best of my ability, basing them on the Toastmasters education program, to prepare for and fulfill meeting assignments, to provide fellow members with helpful constructive evaluations, to help the club maintain positive, friendly environment necessary for all members to learn and grow, to serve my club as an officer when called upon to do so, to treat my fellow club members and our guests with respect and courtesy, to bring guests to club meetings so they can see the benefits Toastmasters membership offers, to adhere to the guidelines and rules for all Toastmasters education and recognition programs, to act within Toastmasters core values of integrity, respect, service, and excellence during the conduct of all Toastmasters activities.
You are muted, TM Eds.
Okay, thank you, Toastmaster Nathan, for playing that one. So once again, hi, fellow Toastmasters and friends. So now let us welcome our host for tonight, Toastmaster Rafiq Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Division K Director, Toastmaster Adrian, for once again giving us the opportunity to stay at home and skill up ourselves with the public speaking skills that we get to learn from world-class speakers right at the comfort of our home. And when I say comfort, I really mean comfort. And those of you are probably guessing right now, am I comfortably dressed? I am, trust me on that. And that's one of the best things about online meetings is that you can be as comfortable as you like and don't worry about it. All right, on that note, allow me to kickstart episode number 3 of volume 3 of the Stay Home Skill Up series, where we are adding more years of Toastmasters wisdom to your arsenal of public speaking skills. We started off with our series 1, which was volume 1. And after the success of volume 1, we went on to volume 2. And here we are looking at the 3rd episode of volume 3. And we are not done yet with volume 3. We still have a lot more wisdom to be shared through this online platform. But let's talk about today's episode. Our journey of adding wisdom of public speaking has taken us way back, not 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years back in time. But we've gone back almost 30 years plus back in time to bring you here a gem of world-class public speaking. And we have our guest with us here today who's going to share his wisdom of his learning in Toastmasters and as a public speaker and as a world champion of public speaking. Back in 1987, when I look at all the old videos before the 1990s era, I would look at all the contestants and say, the judges would have a really, really tough time because all the speeches look like world championship winning speeches. However, in the recent past, it's very clear when you hear the contestants and you know this is a contestant that's going to win. But back in the days, it was not that easy. And I'm not the one to say that. We need to hear this from our guest speaker himself, who has been there and done that and has surpassed all these challenges and become the world champion of public speaking in the year 1987. But before I give the floor to the speaker, let me tell you a few great things about our speaker. To start with, our speaker today, who's featured in episode number 3, is the world champion of public speaking 1987. He's a recipient of the Toastmasters Presidential Citation for Service Award in 2007, a retired broadcaster since 1975, working primarily in television and radio, where his work stretched between 1975 all the way to 2000 and 2011. The Weight Watchers leader and a personal coach between 2012 and 2017, and currently a teacher's aide at the Deer Creek Intermediate School. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, let me now allow you all to gain from this wisdom of public speaking, the champion himself, 1987 world champion of public speaking, Toastmaster Harold Patterson.
Thank you, Toastmaster Rafiq. Very much appreciated. I just have to stop for a moment and just look and just realize where I am. It's amazing that we can join together like this halfway around the world. I'm here in Oklahoma, you're in the Philippines, and I think there are some others joining from other locations in the world as well. And I have really learned to enjoy this Zoom format and to be able to meet people and see people in a way that I maybe would never have been able to do it. It's unfortunate under the circumstances, but it is certainly a pleasure to be with you here today. Today I'm going to talk under the title of Anatomy of a Speech, and I'm going to screen share in just a moment and show you some slides, and we're going to walk through that. And I want to tell you a story of this speech, the speech that you saw as you were entering into the Zoom format here earlier, and break it down for you and really give you a look at how the speech was built in this one personal way that I did it, and share that with you. And maybe you can have a takeaway that when you get ready to build your speech, whether it be for a speech contest, a civic club, another Toastmasters club, wherever you're going to give that speech, maybe it'll help you in your preparation as well. So I'm going to go to the screen share now and see if this works for me. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
Somebody give me a thumbs up. Thank you. To give you a little background on this speech I gave, as you've seen on the slide, in 1987, the World Championship of Public Speaking. And I won the World Championship of Public Speaking with this speech, but it was actually developed a year before. I was in the international finals in 1986. And in 1986, I progressed, as you did at that time, through the speech contest protocol. I won the club, I won the area, I won the division, and went to the district, and I did not win. I was first runner-up. So it ended for me right there. The regional speech contest, regional conference and contest, was 3 weeks away. And the district contest, it was over for me because I took second place. So I let everything go and did not have a speech prepared for the regional contest. There was no need, I wasn't going. And then I got a call about a week after the district contest from the district governor. And the district governor told me that the winner of our district contest was not going to be able to attend. So I had to prepare a speech, and I had 2 weeks to prepare a speech. I had no idea. I did have the quote from Renoir, which I thought would make a good speech, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to prepare that. Not only did I have to prepare a speech, memorize it, internalize it so that I wouldn't forget it on the stage, but I had to forget that other speech that was so much a part of me over 4 months that I had to get that out of my mind. So what I did was develop a map. And in doing that map, I went to, can you believe this? I went to the Toastmasters Manual for Professional Speaking. And when I looked in that book, I found some interesting comments in there which were very helpful. And so I think probably the first lesson is this: if you're trying to make a speech, stick to Toastmasters, stick to the manuals. Of course, this was in the legacy program. We have the pathways now, but go to that reference to find out what you need to do. The first letter of the word speech, I'm going to try to read this at the top here. The following acronym that we're going to look at here is designed to help you build a quality, entertaining, inspirational speech. And here's a tip. This gets away from the speech contest format a little bit, but you can use this anywhere. If you are asked to speak for 25 minutes, speak 20. Always finish before they expect it. That alone will make you a good speaker. If you don't believe this, then go out and speak to a civic club sometime. And when they tell you to speak 25, speak 20. They tell you to speak 15, speak 10. Chances are good that they're going to run overtime. People have a limited amount of time, and they're going to start leaving if you're not finished. And nobody ever complains when somebody finishes early. The S in the word speech stands for short, simple stories. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, that's 3 S's. Well, yeah, I'm going to change the spelling of the word speech and put 3 S's in it. So just think stories. People remember a story and the point that comes with it. They should be no longer than 2 minutes. A 20-minute speech should have 10 stories in it. A 7-minute speech should have 3 to 4 stories in it. I want to read you something that I looked up when I was developing this speech. In putting it together, I needed to put it together in the easiest way I could to make sure that I remembered it. Remember, this was 1986, not 1987. And it was the regional conference, not the international convention. So with 2 weeks to get this prepared, I had my quote that I was going to surround the speech with. And I read this in the motivational speaking or the inspirational speech, the motivational speech out of the Professional Speaker's Manual. It says this: motivational speaking is speaking in parables, telling lively and interesting stories about people who have achieved in spite of adversity. Well, I like this. This worked well for me because that's what I loved. I loved listening to Zig Ziglar telling those stories. I loved listening to Earl Nightingale telling those stories. I loved listening to Norman Vincent Peale telling those stories of people who had succeeded. So that's what I wanted to do. Then it says a 45-minute talk should be sprinkled with at least 15 or 20 2-minute stories. Make only a few points and illustrate them with human interest stories. So this was my model. This was how I started. Now, the P in the word speech is personalize your speech. You become more credible if you have in some way experienced what you're talking about. My mentor at that time was a man by the name of Dick Snyder. Dick Snyder was a past district governor in Oklahoma and a past international director for Toastmasters. And he said, Harold, you're a pretty good speaker, but you need to talk about yourself. And I said, I have a problem talking about myself. I want to talk about other people. You know, I'm not much. I want to talk about somebody else who's really done something. And he said, Harold, you've done something. We've all done something. In order for your speech to be credible, you need to let people know that you know what you're talking about. So include yourself in your speech, because people are sitting in the audience saying, what right does this person have to talk to me about this? But once you include yourself in some way, shape, or form, then it becomes credible. 2 E's in the word speech. I'm going to put them both up there together. Energy and enthusiasm, they tie together. Energy comes naturally if you do the 2 above. If you have the short, simple stories, stories that you love, stories that mean something to you, that's going to create the energy and the enthusiasm that you need. If you personalize your speech, if you include yourself in there, that's an emotional moment, and people will feel that emotion because you're talking about an experience that you had. Enthusiasm works hand in hand with energy. Enthusiasm can be accomplished in just a whisper as well. You don't have to be jumping up and down to show enthusiasm. Emerson said, nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. Confidence. Practice your speech. Make it part of you. If you're nervous before the speech, just remember that someone needs to hear what you have to say. Then you'll rise above the nervousness. There are many aspects of confidence. We gain confidence as we speak in Toastmaster meetings, as we participate in table topics, as we do all of the things that we're asked to do in the Toastmasters format, we gain confidence in making presentations. The one thing about the speech contest format is that we are limited by time. If you go 1 second past 7 minutes and 30 seconds, you are disqualified. So consequently, we must know our speech extremely well. And I don't recommend memorizing all your speeches, but for the speech contest, that speech, you not only need to memorize it, you need to internalize it and make it part of you. I think one of the things that you can gain confidence is by watching past speakers. Go and look at the person who won last year. Look at that video 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Pick out one you really like. That's a modeling element. I know the first time I did that, I watched the 1983 World Championship of Public Speaking won by Roy Fenstermaker. And I learned many things about that. I learned that the speech is emotional, the speech is simplistic, and it gives meaning, it gives hope to people. But I also learned a very important element in that speech too. If you go back, if you had the opportunity to look at Roy Fenstermaker's speech in 1983, title of the speech was Retirement Never. And about 20 seconds into his speech, with a gesture such as this, he knocked his lapel mic to the floor. Well, I think for a lot of us, that would have destroyed us, but not him. A judge or a timekeeper, somebody picked up the microphone, handed it to him, and he did the rest of the speech holding that lapel mic between his fingers like this. But by the end of the speech, you didn't notice it. The speech was fabulous. And he captured the audience, and he won the World Championship of Public Speaking. I knew by watching that, I knew I needed the confidence to be able to be ready for anything. I practiced at clubs, breakfast clubs, where waitresses were taking orders for breakfast, and clinking of glasses and people eating, all kinds of noise going on in the room, so that I couldn't be distracted. And at the time I was practicing this, my daughter was between 1 and 2 years of age, and she would scream at times when I was practicing my speech. So all of these things were around me, and it played off to a very important role, because in that regional speech contest in 1986, when I gave the first draft of this speech after just learning it in 2 weeks, there was a telephone out in the hallway of the convention center in Denver, Colorado, that rang 8 times. I don't believe anybody ever answered that phone, but it rang 8 times during my speech. But I wasn't distracted because I had the confidence of the practice and the background in giving that speech. Now, if you're nervous before the speech, anybody ever get nervous before the speech? I still get nervous before I give a speech. It never changes. It never goes away. Now that's healthy. That's good. That means you're going to work at making a good speech. The speech contest just kind of adds to the nervousness. And I can remember many times sitting before a speech contest thinking, what was I thinking when I did this? What was I thinking about when I decided I wanted to do this? I was depressed. And you know what happens when you're depressed? You're thinking about yourself. And so in order to change that, I realized I needed to think about somebody else. And it occurred to me that every Toastmasters meeting I'd gone to, every speech contest I'd gone to, I got something from everybody that spoke. And I've been to a lot of Toastmasters meetings. Every time I came out of a Toastmasters meeting, I felt better than when I went in, because people were giving a part of themselves. They were speaking, they were talking. So I knew that when I spoke, somebody in the room was going to gain something from it. There were times when I heard people speak that it was monumental for me. It was life-changing. And I think, okay, this might be the day. This might be the speech. This might be the one that information I have might be very important to somebody. So I created a prayer. And the prayer went something like this. Oh Lord, I have a great speech. I will give it in the best way that I know. Somebody in this room tonight needs to hear what I have to say. Nothing else matters. I have a great speech. And with that, I would open my eyes and I would begin to scan the room. Say, who is that person? I'll never know. I'll never know. I'll never know who that person is, but somebody's in here. They need to hear my speech. And so I'm going to give this speech. By doing that, I took the attention off of myself, which was causing the depression. And then I began to think about other people. And that was an important element to gain the confidence to work this pattern all the way through, right up until the start of the speech contest. The H in the word speech is humor. It's the bookmark. People remember points that are made with humor. It relaxes your audience in mind and body. And sometimes you might think that you're not a funny person. You just need to think funny to start with. Think about things that make you laugh when you're just in a conversation one-on-one with somebody. Each of you laugh. What made that other person laugh? What made you laugh? And then think funny. I think one of my favorite movies was North by Northwest. And Cary Grant in that movie was walking out of his office with his secretary at the beginning of the movie. He gets in a cab with her and he said, "Do you think I look heavy-ish?" And she said, "No, I don't think you look heavy-ish." He said, "Well, I feel heavy-ish. I think I look heavy-ish." He said, "Here's what I want you to do Monday morning. Put a note on my desk that says, think thin. Think thin. So I want you to put a note on your desk that says, think funny." And I'm going to be silent for a moment and just let you read these elements of ways to think funny and practice being funny. These might be things that you might want to try to do. I think that last one is a little too close to the truth now to be all that funny, but I think you get the idea. Use humor, think funny, and build that into your presentations. Let's take a look at this map now, Anatomy of a Speech, and this is for a 7-minute speech. And this is kind of the map that I created that I needed to do in order to get this speech done quickly in a total of 2 weeks' time. Had the open, supporting premise, quote, tell them what you're going to tell them. Hey, have you heard that before? Tell them what you're going to tell them. It's 1 minute and 20 seconds. So you know the second one already. Tell 3 stories that support your premise, quote, or just tell them. So first you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, then you're going to tell them. So I had my stories picked out for this speech. I had story number 1, story number 2, story number 3. And finally, of course, in the close, you're going to re-emphasize your original premise or quote and tell them what you told them. I needed to make this easy for me, so I tried to take the pain passes and make the quote at the beginning, make the quote again at the end, making the ending very similar to the beginning, just changing some metaphors with it so that I could remember this speech and get through it. In 1986, I won the Region 3 speech contest with that speech. And my mentor told me I needed to save it for the international speech the next year. So I did that. Now, you can't do that anymore, so don't save speeches. I think they've got new rules which say you not only can't use a speech for that year, you can't use a speech from previous years. But back at this time, you could do this. Now, that speech you saw earlier, we're going to watch it again in just a minute so that you can see all the things that I did. I made some changes. The speech that I gave in 1986 was about 75 or 80% of the speech that it became 1987. Obviously, I had a lot more time to prepare for it. After I finished it, then here's what the anatomy of the pain passes, which ended up being 7 minutes and 18 seconds. So I was pushing the limits on that speech. At 7 minutes and 30 seconds, I finished in 7 minutes and 18 seconds. The open, tell them what you're going to tell them. It was 1 minute and 25 seconds long. The body of the speech, tell 3. You notice I conveniently changed that because instead of telling 3 stories, I told 4 stories. So now I've changed it to 3 or 4 stories that support your premise, quote, or tell them. Story number 1 was 1 minute and 15 seconds. Story number 2, 1 minute 27. Story number 3, only 59. And story number 4 was 1 minute 30. The close, tell them what you told them, was 42 seconds in length. So you see the difference. My opening 1 minute 25 to set the framework, set the groundwork, and the close 42 seconds. But I'm hammering home in that close what I started with up here. The whole thing surrounds and emphasizes this phrase right here, the pain passes. Now let's see if we can take a look at it again. If you want to go see it on your own sometime, you can go to youtube.com and look at just type in Harold Patterson, the pain passes is the best way to do it. There's a number of ways to look it up, but I'm going to show you if I can on a new share. I hope this is okay with my host. I'm going to go to what I've prepared here and see if it works, and you can see and follow along for yourself and see if you can pick out the various stories, pick out the breaks, pick out the various ideas that I'm trying to do.
Speaker number 9, Harold Patterson. The pain passes. The pain passes. Harold Patterson. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, friends, and distinguished guests. At the beginning of this century in a home in southern France, the great French impressionist Henri Matisse watched as an easel was propped in front of a crippled old man. And he watched as a nurse placed a paintbrush between the fingers of the old man's twisted rheumatic hand. And then Matisse turned to his friend, the aging artist, Pierre Auguste Renoir, and asked him why he continued to paint when the pain was so intense. And Renoir's answer was this: my dear friend, the pain passes, but the beauty remains. What a magnificent thought. The pain passes, but the beauty remains. Renoir's pain eventually took his life, yet the beauty of his works, the creation of his art, remains with us even today. The very nature of our human existence ensures us that we too, at some time, in some way, will experience pain. And whether it be physical, emotional, or both, long-term, short-term, or lasting a lifetime, we must remember to be true to ourselves and to do those things which bring us the greatest joy. And then, too, like Renoir, our pain will pass. Sometimes our pain may be emotional. Someone once said that the human mind is the most remarkable of all creations. Think about that. It starts working even before we are born. It works continuously 24 hours a day, collecting and storing information, and never stops until we stand up to give a speech. As Toastmasters, probably the greatest pain that we will experience will be in those anxious moments just before we give our first speech. Our icebreaker, remember? That knot right in the pit of your stomach. The trembling legs, the blood racing through your veins, those sweaty palms. Yet no matter how great that pain is, there is no greater beauty than the feeling of accomplishment as we take our seat when it's over, and that's a feeling of beauty that remains with us always. On June 23rd, 1940, a baby girl was born to a couple in Clarksville, Tennessee. The joy of this birth was overshadowed by the complications of its prematureness. The child developed double pneumonia and then scarlet fever, and by the time she was 6 years old, it was determined that she had polio. And that meant braces, confinement, and excruciating pain, yet with each visit to the doctor, her questions were always the same. When can I take the braces off? When will I walk? When will I be able to run with my friends? And each time the doctor's answer was this: I don't know. Maybe never. Little girl's pain was great, yet it was not strong enough to overcome her spirit. Because one day she did take the braces off. And she did walk. And she did run. And did she ever run? In Rome in 1960, she ran for the whole world. To the French, she was known as La Gazelle. To the Italians, the Black Pearl. And to the rest of the world, her friends and especially her 18 brothers and sisters. She was known as Wilma Rudolph, fastest woman in the world. Winner of 3 Olympic gold medals in Rome in 1960, Wilma Rudolph was living proof that the pain passes and the beauty remains. The pain of losing a loved one is something that never quite goes away, yet in time, even the pain of a loss is eased by the remembrance of that person's life. In 1935, a man died tragically in a plane crash in Alaska. The entire world felt the pain of this loss. His gift was laughter, and at this time he was helping a troubled world laugh its way through a Great Depression. The loss of Will Rogers was a painful one indeed, yet the beauty of his life, his wit and wisdom, remains with us to this very day. Will Rogers said this: in Oklahoma, we have an average annual rainfall of 31.2 inches. And boy, you ought to be there the day we get it. And again, the beauty remains. Sometimes our pain may be both physical and emotional. In 1983, a man and woman were married at the age of 34, and 2 years later, they decided to have a child. Not an unusual decision, but because of their age, they knew that certain precautions must be taken, and they were. After several thorough examinations, the doctor said, go for it. Their dream of having a child of their own would soon come true. And for the first 7 months, the pregnancy progressed flawlessly, but then the doctor noticed that something was wrong. A condition called preeclampsia would send the mother to bed under 24-hour hospital observation and threaten the lives of both mother and child. The only cure was to deliver the child now, but it was too soon, too early to do that. Valuable time was needed, so they waited and they prayed. 3 agonizing weeks went by. Finally, the doctor said, "We must deliver this child now." At 5:21 p.m. on July 24th, 1985, the doctor handed me my newborn daughter. And he looked at me and said, "She's 6 weeks premature and only 4 pounds, 4 ounces. She's a fighter, and she'll be just fine." And as the tears flowed freely, my wife and I now knew that the pain had passed and the beauty was here. The pain of life is inevitable for each of us. And whether it be physical, emotional, or both, long-term, short-term, or lasting a lifetime, we must remember to be true to ourselves and to do those things which bring us the greatest joy. And then finally, to remember, listen to, and embrace the words of Renoir as they are brushed across the canvas of our soul when he said, "My dear friend, the pain passes, but the beauty, oh, the beauty remains forever." Mr. Toastmaster.
Hey, I don't know if you heard, but we just had a big
Okay, I guess I've got my sound back on now. I think the bottom line all of this that I want to point out to you is that I'm not any different from the rest of you. If I can do this, then you can do this too. I'll now return control to our Toastmaster of the meeting.
All right. Thank you so much, distinguished Toastmaster Harold Patterson. That speech definitely is, I'll borrow the words from the chat box, that speech definitely is timeless. And before we move on, I would like to acknowledge the presence of 1991 World Champion of Public Speaking, distinguished Toastmaster Dave Ross, who in fact quoted you in one of his events at episode number 3, right before you. DTM Dave, thank you so much for attending and being with us here today.
It's my pleasure and honor. Harold, you remain an inspiration to me. You have been an inspiration for many years. And I have a debt to you that I'm still trying to repay, because the other thing about Harold is he has been so generous to the people in our district. He's given us not only his words in his speech, but he's been a force to keep the district going and growing. If you meet anybody in Oklahoma who knows Harold Patterson, Toastmaster or not, the first thing they'll say, he's a fine man. And that's exactly who he is. Thank you, Harold, for being the fine man you are.
Thank you, Dave. You are very kind. Very nice words. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. I mean, I think this just getting better and better. We've got 2 world champions in the house now. So with that note, ladies and gentlemen, our lovely attendees, this is your time to start posting your questions on the chat box, and I will guarantee that if time permits, I'm definitely going to acknowledge you and let you ask your questions directly to DTM Harold Patterson. But in order to kickstart our Q&A session, I would like to invite our first reactor for today. We're going to have 2 reactors. So the first among them will give us her feedback on the session and her takeaways from this particular workshop and kickstart the Q&A with the first question. To do so, let me invite Toastmaster Gladys. Toastmaster Gladys, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening, Raf. Good evening, Harold. Thank you. Thank you for sharing yourself. So struck by your personal style that you shared so many stories. I loved your use of the word speech and emphasizing not only in the first letter speech of the stories, But then over and over, the stories flowed in your actually telling the rest of your things. Personalize your speech. That was, again, stories, the energy and the enthusiasm, the confidence. I loved your story about practicing in a breakfast club. I thought to myself, who has the courage to do this? What made you think of going to a breakfast club? I'll let you answer. I really hope to hear that. What made you think of going to a breakfast club to bounce your speech off people and then hearing a phone ring and not being distracted by it, and nobody else being distracted by it because they were so mesmerized by you? And we saw that in your winning speech. My personal struggle is, well, I have a lot of leveling up to do, but the humor one, that one I really have to work on more. How do you come up with a title like The Pain Passes? How do you think of going to a breakfast club? These things that drive you, were they your own ideas? Were they things that came at you? And I just so much appreciate the way that we saw and we heard, yes, some stories of others, but how you as a person were challenged and how you rose above your challenges to become not only a better speaker, but a better person. And then my biggest takeaway, I'd say, is the challenge that the people who listen to you should leave the room a better person because you had a message for them. And I just really want to thank you for that. So could I ask for a response to the idea of going to a breakfast club?
Okay. Yeah, two things, the two questions that I picked up on was, how do you pick out a title? And I think I have to go back to the time that was for me. And I think everybody is looking for self-help methods to do. And that's being a young man, a young career-oriented man. I was looking for self-help methods myself at that time. So I read a lot of books. As I mentioned, I read a lot of Zig Ziglar. I guess I was listening to Earl Nightingale at that time on tapes. And I think Earl Nightingale was one who mentioned the quote, "The pain passes," in there. But I ran across that quote in a couple of other items that I had read. And so it was just a quote that struck me at that time, and it seemed to be that it was ever present on my mind at that moment. So I would encourage everyone to read about people and their accomplishments and how they did it. I mean, it's not, you don't have to go back to Zig Ziglar and Earl Nightingale. It's going on right now, today. There's people, there's stories that are happening at this moment as we speak. And in this environment that we're in right now with the COVID-19, there are some amazing stories about people that can do that. On to the Breakfast Club meeting in Oklahoma, we had a number of clubs that meet all day long, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. Not every one of them have a meal, but one or two of them that I went to in the morning because I wanted to practice this at a number of clubs, that they were having breakfast and they needed to get in. It was an hour-long meeting. They needed to get in, they needed to get out. Waitresses needed to take their orders. So nothing stopped them from eating their breakfast. And so that was a good challenge. That was a good way to practice and get through the speech and not pay any attention to what was going on peripherally around the room. Hope that answers the questions.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Toastmaster Gladys, for asking and kickstarting the Q&A session. Our second reactor for today is our District 75 Public Relations Manager. Allow me to welcome distinguished Toastmaster Nomel Hilongos.
Thank you very much, Rafiq. Harold, thank you very much. Good day to you. And I think I would just have to echo the popular impression about your speech, The Pain Passes. It is really one timeless speech that we would love to watch over and over again. And we never imagined that this day would actually come, that we get to interact with you personally. This is the closest to a personal interaction that we can get, and we're so happy. And now that we have discovered the story behind the speech, now we are even more in love with it and with you as a speaker. So your presentation today, Harold, is very impressive. It touches straight to the heart of a Toastmaster simply because it was so simple. And yet, in its simplicity, you allowed us to realize that Toastmasters, as a training program, as an educational program, actually provides us with very simple tools. And all we need to actually do is just to go through them, do not rush through them, do not find shortcuts, but enjoy the beauty of the actual experience. When you talk about the professional speaking advanced manual, which we will be grandfathering soon, it brought back a lot of beautiful memories for those of us who were given the chance to work on the legacy program. And I really thank you because you just reminded us that even by July 1st, we can always go back to our old manuals and learn and refresh our thoughts and our skills from them. So thank you very much. Your acronym about the word speech is simple but beautiful, and it's spot on. It gives us a very simple to follow instructions on how we can be better speakers, not just champion speakers, but regular, ordinary speakers who can make a difference in another person's life. So thank you. Thank you very much, Harold. As I've always said, The Pain Passes is a timeless speech. And now, after watching it again, after your presentation, I have fallen in love with the speech more than ever. So thank you very much, Harold. Now, my question to you, because I was told that I need to kickstart the Q&A. My question, Harold, now is, your speech is a perfect example of a classic speech. There are no fireworks involved in it. It's just ideas, beautifully spoken, with words beautifully woven, injecting humor here and there, and following your outline. Yes, I was actually able to identify the 1 minute intro, the 3 1 minute stories, and the less than a minute conclusion. My question now is, observing current champion speakers, observing current speakers who inject a lot of theatrics in their on their presentations. Don't you think that it's a good suggestion for us to go back to how you actually do speeches in 1980s? The classic form of elocution? Or is there's nothing wrong with the theatrics that we see now in speeches?
Very good question. I think that, when it comes to speech contests, as long as the rules allow people to do the things that they do, then I think all of that's going to be okay. Then more power to the speakers to do that. I have a tendency to appreciate someone who speaks without in using your term, the theatrics that you talked about. But at the same time, that speech that wins does have to be a meaningful speech. It does have to provide something for everyone to carry with it. And it does have to provide a response from the audience. If you look at the judging forums, the judges are not only judging that speaker, they're judging how the audience responds to that speaker. And so I think there's a lot of elements that are in there. And I know I appreciate looking at all of the current speeches and looking at what people do to gain the attention, to be different. And I think that was one thing when I did my speech, one thing that I didn't mention, I talked about the fact that I had trouble talking about myself, but thought, how can I do this differently? And I thought, maybe I can tell a story where I mentioned myself at the end of the speech. And at that time, if anybody's old enough to go back into the 80s, that Paul Harvey was on the news and he did a segment called The Rest of the Story. And I listened to that driving home from work every day. And on the rest of the story, what he told was a story about somebody, but he didn't reveal the name until he got to the very end. So it made you listen to the entire story. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. That makes me feel more comfortable about talking to myself. But I'm also going to do that in my other stories. I'm not necessarily going to reveal who it is until I get to the end. And so that was how I differentiated myself at that time. And I think everybody's looking for a way to differentiate themselves. Hope that answers a little bit.
All right. Thank you so much, DTM Namel and DTM Dave Ras. I got a bow tie too. I've been inspired by you for the for the last couple of sessions. You have great bow ties. So I thought, they say do what the champions do, and here I am with the bow tie. Thank you so much for that. All right. I have a question of my own, Toastmaster Harold, as our attendees jot down the questions for you. I have a question of my own. I noticed at the right beginning of your presentation, you said we need to tell them what we want to tell them, and then you got to do this earlier in your speech. Now, I have heard certain speakers say this, that if you're going to give away the message right at the beginning, then people lost interest in your speech. So how do you tell them what you want to tell them right at the beginning, but at the same time maintain the same enthusiasm all throughout the speech, so that people don't go like, they go like, okay, that's what he's going to talk about. I've heard this before. How do you maintain that enthusiasm all throughout?
Well, I think it's the stories that maintain the enthusiasm for you, the stories and the build up. And I will say, I don't think there's any one way to do a speech or any one way to win a speech contest. I don't want to be that person that says, don't do this or don't do that, or you can only do this, or make sure you never do that. I don't want to be that person, because that's not true. The very thing that someone might say, don't ever do this, then you're going to sit there and watch somebody win the world championship of public speaking doing that very thing. It all comes down to content, I think, and how you present that. I remember in 1986, just a little side note on that they were, of course, televising the speech contest at that time. Technology was not as sophisticated as it is now, and they said, we would appreciate it if you not wear white and red. White flared the camera, and red gave problems to the camera too. Well, I had made up my mind that I wanted to wear a white shirt and a red tie. So I did end up wearing the red tie, but my shirt was an off-white. It shows up as white on there. But in 1986, Arabella Bengtson, that won the world championship of public speaking, wore a white dress and a red scarf. So when someone tells you not to do something, that might be the very thing that you want to do. And I think when you're talking about holding interest, if you go back, or in my speech, if you go back to when I had to prepare it, I had to get the simplest method I could get to get it done and to get it memorized. So I went back to that old saying of tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Because I had to get the speech put together, I had to get it memorized. And one of my greatest fears is to stand up on a stage and forget my speech. And I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to get through the speech. And then I discovered, hey, this really works. What they were talking about really does work. So hope that answers your question somewhat.
It does. It does. Thank you so much, DJM Harold. We got a question coming in from Toastmaster Marites Abu Habil. Toastmaster Marites, if you can hear me, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. Is my voice clear? Hello, DTM Harold. What can you advise, like a rookie Toastmaster like me? How can we improve ourselves in every speeches that we do? Like me, I have a problem with making stories, honestly, because I wanted to find stories that are really meaningful, and you said that something that is simple. So for me as a rookie, what is your best advice?
Well, first of all, as a beginning Toastmaster, realize that you already are a good speaker. It's already there. You are a good speaker. I believe speaking is a little bit like yes, we do learn all these skills and we pick up on elements that we learn in Toastmasters, but the gift is already there. It's a little bit more of an unpeeling of all of those layers that we have around us that are preventing us from our best speaking talents coming out. So you're already a good speaker. You have the ability, you have the talent to do that. What you want to do is, as you read, as you learn, as you hear stories, those stories that bring a little tear to your eye, make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, then those are the stories you want to share with other people. Because if that happens to you, then you're going to be able to convey that message to other people, because that's important to you. That's an important message. And so look for those kinds of stories. As you read, as you discover, we have modern day self-help advocates who have tremendous quotes for us. And it's those kinds of things, whatever that might be for you. Again, the gift that you have is that you are you, and nobody else can do that. And that's the biggest, you are your best prop, so to speak. And so capitalize on that and read and learn, and you'll come up with the stories. I trust you will.
Right. Thank you, Toastmaster Meritus, for that. We've got another question coming in, DTM Harold, and this one is from an anonymous source. And the question goes like this: Toastmaster Harold, is it okay to talk about controversial topics in the international speech contest at the convention?
That's a challenging question. And in fact, the year that I won the World Championship of Public Speaking, the man who finished in second place that year had been an international finalist before. And he said that he spoke about abortion in his international finals speech contest from early 80s. I'm not sure what that was. And he said what he learned from that experience, he said, felt like I had a good speech and felt like I had a good topic, but I didn't place anywhere in those finals. What happens when you're in the speech contest environment is that you are being judged among those other contestants, even though it's the international finals and you've reached it by competing to Toastmasters essentially all over the world to get there. You're really competing against those only 8 or 9 or 10 finalists that are right there on the stage with you. If you give a speech that is harder to digest in between two speeches that are funny and hopeful, then where are the judges going to go? If all of your abilities, if all of your gestures, if all of your facial expressions, if all of your movement, if your attire is otherwise just perfect, they have to find something to judge you on. And if it comes down to, well, this person gave me hope, this person gave me a controversial subject, so what do I do? They have to make a decision at some point about how they're going to judge. I try to recommend or tell people that I feel like in a contest format that your speech needs to be hopeful, it needs to provide hope, it needs to be inspirational. But aside from that, outside of that, we do need to talk about controversial topics. We do need healthy debates. We do need civil discourse. All of those things are important in society. And that is bottom line what Toastmasters is all about. It's about good communication. So I guess maybe I kind of straddled the fence there a little bit, but I hope that kind of answers your question.
Thank you, DTM Harold, for that, and the anonymous person who asked the question. We've got another question coming in, and this one is from a Toastmaster from Florida, distinguished Toastmaster Fetta Inayel. If you can hear us, sir, go ahead and unmute yourself, and you can direct your question to DTM Harold.
Thank you very much, and I'm so inspired by this young gentleman, I can say. My question is, in 1987, when you delivered your speech and became a champion, were the judges at that time anonymous? And if not, do you know when it started and why it started? And what's your opinion about that? Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure I heard your question entirely. It was something about the timing of the speech and when the timing.
Yeah, I'll repeat that for you, DTM Harold. His question is, back in 1987, the year that you competed, were the judges anonymous? Were the identity of the judges was anonymous back then, or was it something that got started recently?
I think that the judges have become more anonymous recently. They weren't recognized to a great deal at that time, but you could find out, I think you could find out who they were more easily at that time than you can now. I think it's wise that the judges are anonymous. I don't think that it's necessary that anybody know who they are. It's not important for the speakers to know where they are or who they are. But I can remember at certain times I was talking to somebody at one international convention after I'd won the World Championship of Public Speaking. And I walked up to somebody that I knew and I said, hey, I was just talking to, and it was mentioning one of the speakers. And he immediately raised up his hands. He said, I can't talk to you, I'm a judge, and walked away. And that was the right thing to do by doing that. So I think judges have an important responsibility, and I respect that they want to be as objective as they possibly can. And everybody is objective within their own framework, within their own culture. So I appreciate them doing that. So I don't think I have a very good answer to your question. Somebody who might be well versed in the bylaws might be able to answer that question better than what I've done here. But I hope that helps a little bit.
All right, thank you, DTM Fetta from Florida, for asking that question. Thank you, DTM Harold. We've got another question. This one coming in from District 109, Greece, by Panos Corel. Toastmaster Panos, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Harold, for bringing what I could best describe as perennial speech writing wisdom. I see Dave nodding his head, so I take that as Dave's seal of approval for my choice of words. I've been looking for the right word, and this is exactly how it feels to me. Let me first pay you another compliment, but it's not a compliment. You can think of it as my impression from your speech. I judge the value of a speech to me by my willingness of seeing a speech again and again. So when I'm ready to hit the repeat button, I know that the speech has value to me personally. And I'll let everyone in this room consider the value that your speech and each and every speech has to themselves. And I'm going to do my best to phrase my question because it has to do with today's society, today's speaking culture, which is a product of our society. So I would like you to echo back with in your own words about today's speaking. My question: today we live in a world that, from my observations, I would describe as we have glorified success. Success is one of the most important things we go about in our daily lives. And a personal measure of our own success in life is how successful we are or we appear to be. And that brings us closer to talking about speech performance. I hear more talk about performance than value. Again, my own observations. Now, together with that, we're very much pleasure oriented. We have a feel good culture today. So sometimes when we listen to a speaker that has a message that moves them first, we might be quick to judge that the speaker is a bit pompous, or maybe the speaker appears to be a bit conceited. So we moved closer to performance and pleasing the audience than giving a strong message like you did in your speech. So how would you recommend a speaker that is speaking today to go about expressing modesty and humility in today's speaking culture, but at the same time maintaining the speech value so that it can be a valuable speech in 30 years' time, 40 years' time, or as long as we have access to recorded media? I hope my question was clear. I look forward to your reply, Harold. Again, palms together. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. I think the question that you ask is one of the hardest questions to answer for all of that. Over the years, I've talked to a lot of speakers, or a lot of speakers have asked me questions about what they should do. They want me to evaluate their speeches. I'm sure Dave has experienced the same thing. And it's very difficult. We can evaluate style and presentation, protocol, those kinds of things. But to each individual and to current culture and society, it's going to be different. I know I look at society today just as itself, and there are things that I disagree with personally. And I look at what's going on with certain age groups, and I look at my daughter, and she and I disagree on some things, and she's in her mid-30s now. And I think, gee, I'm turning into my father here. So it's the kind of thing that I have to step back a little bit and accept the fact that there's a certain age group, and I was among that age group at one time, that are going to think differently, that have certain things imposed upon them. Now, I say all of that because I think that impacts us as Toastmasters. The Toastmaster leaders in our district, in your district, most of you are very young. A lot of them are my daughter's age. I talk to people every day and work with people who call me by my first name. But then my daughter's friends, who are also in their mid-30s, since they've known me since they were 8 years old, they call me Mr. Patterson. And I keep telling them, call me Harold, but they won't do it. It's because it's ingrained in there. So I think we have to have, as in the age bracket that I am, that have to have an open mind still to realize things are constantly in a state of change. And as you age, you don't keep up with change as fast as you once did. 10 years ago to me now seems like yesterday. 10 years ago when I was 25 was a whole different world. And so we have to keep all of these things in mind when we're talking to people, when we're talking to people about making speeches. And so I guess getting back to your original question is, make your speech that's important to you. Say what's important to you. Let's build on that. Yes, take all of the instructions from Toastmasters and learn how to build that so that you can get your message across. You're trying to sell, when you're giving a speech, you're trying to sell an idea. And I think that's why I like the format of telling the stories. Throughout that speech, I was trying to sell why the pain passes and the beauty remains. Told people that in the beginning, Say, here's why it's true. This is why it's true. And that's what the stories do. And after each one of those stories, I said, but the beauty remains. And I think that's what you want to do, is that if you have a sales approach, and my background was in sales, and I knew you had to put your best foot forward or your best words forward in all aspects of sales. And so I think that's what you've got to do, no matter where it is or what age or culture that it might be. Long answer. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Toastmaster Panos from District 109, Greece. We got another question coming in, and we have truly a multicultural attendance here today. This question is coming in from District 79, Saudi Arabia, by distinguished Toastmaster Nazir Al Qasim. DTM Nazir Al Qasim, go ahead and unmute yourself, sir, and direct your question.
Okay, thank you so much, Rafiq, for giving me the opportunity. I'd like to thank Mr. Patterson. He is listening with Dave Ross. You guys make me feel good that at this age you are still active Toastmasters and giving it to us. Thank you so much. Now, I remember I lived in Oklahoma, Norman, for 3 months. I know it is hot like here in Saudi Arabia. This is my question to you. After this age, you know, when you took that trophy, did it put pressure on you to perform better and continue your skills as the best speaker in the world? Back to you.
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, because whether you do that or not, people expect you to do that. People expect that every time you stand up to give a speech that you're going to give a world championship speech. And believe me, that doesn't happen. There's a lot of last minute Toastmaster in me that I've created a speech while I'm in the car driving to the meeting, which I don't recommend. But what I know in this is that the best speeches are ones that are prepared, that are well thought out, and that we should all take the time to prepare our speeches well. But I'm guilty. I'm busted. I do take advantage of that sometimes, I guess, might be the truth to say on that. But at times I do prepare well and still prepare those speeches. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, thank you so much, distinguished Toastmaster Nazir Al Qasim from District 79. We've got another question coming in, and this one from DTM Nomel Hilongos from District 75's behalf. DTM Nomel, you can ask your question. Okay, I guess you have some technical difficulties. I'm going to ask the question for you. All right, the question is, DTM Harold, if you had an opportunity, it would be interesting for us to know, what would you have changed or done differently with the speech, The Pain Passes?
I think in this day and age, two things that I noticed that speakers are doing that I didn't do. And one of those is a simple thing that I don't know why I didn't think of it, but I think it's great, is waiting until you've opened the speech before you've recognized the chair. And I think that's great. I love that. If you remember when I started my speech, I immediately recognized the Toastmaster, recognized the chair. And that's just what was done at that time. And other places in the speech, I think I might have been more demonstrative in some other areas. I may have choreographed my movements a little better. I look back at them, I think they were pretty good. As far as the contents of the speech, you have to remember, I made a lot of changes in this speech over a period of more than a year. And so I don't know, as far as the phraseology, I got to the point where I was working almost on every word of that speech. And in creating various metaphors in there took some time. idea of holding my hands up and noticing my own sweaty palms when I said that, that didn't come until very close to the contest that I needed to say that. I had the entire line. It didn't change the line any in it. But to hold that for a moment and hold my hands up and then look at them, that was just a few days before the contest. So there was a lot of work going on in this speech leading right up, well, not a lot of work. There were just some minor changes as the days got close. I don't recommend changing your speech as you get very close to it. But certain metaphors that I added in there, the brushed across the canvas of your soul is one that came to me that fit in with the topic, fit in with Renoir, talking about a canvas and talking about a brush. And so those kinds of things develop over time. So as far as the wording, I don't think I would change too much, but I noticed there's a lot of instruction in terms of choreography. People talk about now, when you speak and you're referencing one person or one topic and you're standing over here to do this, that if you're going to talk about that person again, that you need to come back to that spot on the stage. And I think that's very good advice. That's not something that I had or that I knew about at that time. But that might be something if somebody said, okay, Harold, we're going to do the 1987 contest all again, then that might be some things that I would look at.
All right. Thank you so much, DTM Harold. We've got time for very few questions now. We've got one coming in from Division F Director, Toastmaster April. Toastmaster April, please go ahead and unmute yourself, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone, and good evening, Harold. You don't like the title. It's not really a question. I was just so touched with the directness and the authenticity of what you shared. I don't know if it comes with age, no offense meant. It's how you put perspective in our delivery. It's how you put perspective and value to what we should say. I resonate the most with the question of Panos. So it's not really a question. It's more on, I know you've shared so much, but if you could share some more about why you're staying in Toastmasters, despite it seems like you're so calm, your countenance is apparent. So for us who are still here and who are still trying to be the best version of ourselves, how else can we improve? Maybe perhaps in speech writing or in content searching, but what else is there out there? Good evening.
Thank you for that. And I think that's one of the hard things. If you look at the statistics on the length of time that a person stays in Toastmasters, it's not as long as we would like for it to be. But I think one of the things that I keep remembering about it is that I get excited about meeting new people, making new friends, and it's a great resource for doing that. If you look, I joined Toastmasters when I was in my early 30s, and I made a lot of friends. And when it's a little bit difficult right now on Zoom. You don't get meet the people as well as you could, although I think Zoom is wonderful, but meeting them in person is what you want to do. And when you get back to that, I would encourage you to step outside of your club, go to conferences, meet people, make friends, make acquaintances. You might see these people only once or twice a year, but they'll become great and long-lasting friends. And I look back now over the 37 years that I've been in Toastmasters, and I've made a lot of friends. And that's something that I appreciate very much and something that I count on. And I can't wait to get into my Zoom meeting with my club each Thursday night and be with them and see them and talk to them. And it's these kinds of things that that you just can't set aside. And I believe that unfortunately some people just aren't members long enough. Now they come in and they join for certain educational purposes, and I understand that. Once they've accomplished their goal, they move on. And I think for them, I'm glad that Toastmasters was there. But I think in order to last, then establish those friendships, meet people. And those are the things that are going to keep you in the organization.
All right. Thank you, Toastmaster April, for that question. We have time for last two questions. I have a question here on the chat box. Let me see. This is coming in from. Apparently, I am not able to see the question here. Just one moment, sir. Okay, this one's coming in from Toastmaster Paulo Carranza. Toastmaster Paulo Carranza, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself, sir, and you can direct the question to Toastmaster Harold.
Oh, can you hear me?
Perfectly well, yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity to share a meeting with the champion, Harold. It was a very inspiring one. And I just want to ask a technical question because I'm very interested in giving answers to people who ask me the same question over and over again. And so here it goes. It's about memorizing versus having a general idea on the topic and just going with the flow. What's your take on that, Harold?
Well, what I mentioned earlier, as far as memorizing the speech, I think that's only important in the speech contest format, that you've really got to memorize and internalize that speech in the speech contest because of the time constraints that you're dealing with. If you go over time, you're disqualified. And when you get into, as the audiences get bigger, you don't know what the reaction is going to be. If they laugh at something you've said, or hopefully they applaud at something that you said that you never expected before, then your time gets longer and you don't know where you are with your time. You need to be very conscious of your time in a speech contest format. Outside of that, I love the idea of more or less, for lack of a better term, winging it a little bit, because then you can establish your ideas, like you were talking about, make bullet points and speak from those bullet points. Then you begin to be a little bit more real in your speaking, and people can appreciate. So there's places for both of what you're talking about, but I don't, outside of that speech contest format, I would not recommend that somebody memorize a speech. Just have the general idea of what you want to talk about. And yeah, maybe you want, if there are some complex sentences in there that you're going to have, you might want to review those so that you can say those correctly and get your point across. So I do agree that some rehearsal might be needed. And you might say to yourself, no, I want to say that like this, or I want to change this, or I want to move this down here because it fits better down here. So the rehearsal becomes important, but certainly not as important to memorize the speech.
All right, thank you so much, Toastmaster Pablo Carranza. Now we're coming to the close of our session, and I feel that our session won't be complete if I don't do this. And this wasn't planned, I'm just doing it off the cuff. I would now like to ask and request, in fact, the 1991 World Champion of Public Speaking, Toastmaster Dave Ross, to use this opportunity if you have something to say, or if you have something to ask to DTM Harold Patterson. This is your opportunity, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I often have the opportunity to ask him questions. I don't always exercise it, but yeah, I don't want to ask him a question. I just want to highlight something. Someone mentioned that he has such a very calm countenance and he's always together. That's who he is. He is, if there is one Toastmaster that you could emulate, it would be Harold Patterson. If there's one man that you could emulate as a member of the community, as a member of a family, or an organization, it would be Harold Patterson. And, you know, there really is, he doesn't know this, but there really is a Harold Patterson fan club here in Oklahoma. People that, you know, just realize what a fine man he is. And I'm certain it has been something he's worked on. Maybe he was born that way, I don't know, but we are awfully appreciative that you are who you are and that you are as generous with your time and your talents and your speeches as you are. It was mentioned that he is a teacher's aide. He teaches in our schools. And I just think what lucky kids they are. What lucky kids they are. So I have no question for you, Harold. I'll ask you later on. But I just wanted to praise this publicly one more time.
Thanks, Dave.
All
You're
right.
very kind. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Dave Ross, the 1991 world champion, and thank you for taking my request ad hoc. And I know this was not planned. Thank you so much for that. On this note, I would now like to ask our guest speaker, DTM Harold Patterson, to give us his closing remarks before we end the session.
Well, I think closing remarks would be that, as I mentioned before, and that was typically my closing there for each of you, whatever your aspirations might be, by joining Toastmasters, you're on the right track. If that's a speech that you want to give, if that's a speech contest that you want to participate in, then yeah, go for it. Just remember that the important thing that you're doing there is you're giving a message to somebody, and that's your gift, and nothing else matters. Don't worry about trying to win the contest, because when you've stepped up on that stage, you've already won. You're already there. It's kind of like King Arthur said in Camelot, is at the end of the battle, he said he was going into battle that he knew he was going to lose and he was going to die. And he said, I've already won my battle. And I think that's important for us to, all of us, to remember, is that if you want to do this, if I can do it, you can do it too.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much once again, distinguished Toastmaster Harold Patterson, the 1987 world champion of public speaking, for coming and joining us here all the way and connecting with the world here in District 75, Philippines, and connecting with the world across in different districts, District 109, District 79, I see District 91. We've got attendees from Thailand, we've got attendees from Greece, from Saudi Arabia, and from the Philippines, and of course from the United States, all joining in, connected with the help of Toastmasters International, which is helping us to share ideas and to learn from each other. And over the years, 33 years in the making, before we could have DTM Harold Patterson join us here in the Philippines. I think it has been a long wait for us, but it was worth it. Thank you so much for your time, sir. And it's always a pleasure having world champions with us. Now, before we go and end the session and I hand the control to our Division K director, I would like to announce our episode number 4 in our Stay Home Skill Up series, More Years of Toastmasters. So here is the reveal. Now this one, I have been waiting for this speaker for a really long time, because when I heard the speaker speak, I was so taken aback by the inspiration that I wanted to hear that speech over and over again. Unfortunately, the speech is only available on VHS tape, and unfortunately, Bill Stevens' production is apparently closed, and they do not have a copy either. And I have been waiting to hear from this speaker, and finally, we have the opportunity to hear from the 2006 World Champion of Public Speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, Edward Hearn will be joining us for episode number 4, and which will be happening on the 17th of this month. It has been an amazing experience for me and for the entire team to have all world-class speakers to be featured in our Stay Home Skill Up series, which is adding to more years of Toastmasters wisdom. You have been an amazing audience, and amazing feedback from all of you has given us the inspiration to go ahead. Thank you so much. Keep coming in, keep attending our Stay Home Skill Up series episodes, and we would love to have one of our guests here to attend this episode as well. Dave Ross, I know you're always a visitor for us, and we're just arm's length away from us to have you come to our sessions again. And DTM Harold, we would love to have you as well, sir, to hear and benefit from our speakers from the past years. So with that note, I would like to hand the control now to our lovely and our energetic and wise, I'm sure wise, because after all these years of Toastmasters wisdom, you definitely become wiser. DTM Edrelin Paul Gascon, our Division K Director.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Rafik. First of all, I want to say thank you, Toastmaster Harold, DTM Harold, for gracing our event, our third episode for more years of Toastmasters wisdom. Thank you for sharing us with your tips. And personally, I am thrilled because having you as our speaker tonight, from 1987, I was just a baby that time. So having you and hearing your wisdom is really a thrilling experience for me. I'm really excited when you agreed to join us for this episode. So with that, thank you so much, DTM Harold, for sharing your wisdom and your tips to all District 75 and other districts in the Toastmasters world. So as Division K Director, I officially adjourn this webinar. So before we officially close this meeting, I would like to request everyone to please open your cameras and let's have a group photo with our speaker, DTM Harold and DTM Dave Ross. Toastmaster Rafik.
Yes, I'm working on it right now. So we are having currently, I see 2 screens. So this one's going for screen number 1. Your biggest smiles and your thumbs ups, please. Oh, someone is sharing a screen. If you can unshare the screen, please.
Yes.
Admin, if you can. Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for that. All right, this is screen number 1 with DTM Harold and DTM Dave Ross in the middle in screen number 1, 1, 2, and 3. Thank you. But just give me a moment. I'm going to save the screen and we're going to progress to screen number 2. Oh, screen number 2 does not have DTM Harold and Dave Ross in it. So you both can stop smiling and put your thumbs down. And screen number 2 going 1, 2, and 3. Thank you so much. You've been a lovely audience. I'll see you again for episode number 4 featuring Edward Hearn. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Toastmaster Harold, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a great pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you so
Great
much.
day. I know you're ending the day. You probably like to get to bed and get some sleep. My day is just started.
Starting, yeah. It's almost 10:30 here in the Philippines.
Yeah. Yeah, just 9:30 a.m. here. Thank you. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.